Calgarian Aurora Ducani moved to Alberta in 1965 to work as a teacher in Tabor.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to Canada.
Central Canada is a region consisting of Canada's two largest and most populous provinces, Ontario and Quebec. Geographically, they are not at the centre of Canada but instead overlap with eastern Canada toward the east. Because of their large populations, Ontario and Quebec have traditionally held a significant amount of political power in Canada, leading to some amount of resentment from other regions of the country. Before Confederation, the term Canada specifically referred to Central Canada. Today, the term Central Canada is less often used than the names of the individual provinces. Ontario is one of the 13 provinces and territories of Canada. Located in central Canada, Ontario is the country's most populous province. It is home to 38.3% of the country's population and is the second largest province by total area, after Quebec. Ontario is Canada's fourth largest jurisdiction in total area of all the Canadian provinces and territories. It is home to the nation's capital, Ottawa, and its most populous city, Toronto, which is Ontario's provincial capital. Quebec is one of the 13 provinces and territories of Canada. It is the largest province by area and the second largest by population. Much of the population of Quebec lives in urban areas along the St. Lawrence River, between its most populous city, Montreal, and the provincial capital, Quebec City. The province is the home of the Quebecois Nation. Located in central Canada, the province shares land borders with Ontario to the west, Newfoundland and Labrador to the northeast, New Brunswick to the southeast, and a coastal border with Nunavut. In the south, it borders the United States. The history of education in Canada is rich and diverse, spanning hundreds of years. Here's a brief overview of the key developments and milestones in Canadian education. Indigenous education, pre-European contact. Prior to European contact, Indigenous peoples in what is now Canada had their own systems of education, which emphasized oral traditions, storytelling, and the passing down of knowledge from one generation to the next. Early European settlement, the first formal education in Canada was provided by religious organizations, primarily the Catholic Church and later the Anglican Church. In 1620, Quebec established its first school, run by the Ursuline nuns, making it one of the earliest educational institutions in North America. The British North America Act, which laid the foundation for the Canadian Confederation in 1867, gave provinces control over education within their territories. As a result, education became a provincial responsibility. Expansion of public education. In the late 19th century, provinces began to establish publicly funded and non-denominational school systems. The concept of compulsory education was introduced, making attendance mandatory for children of a certain age. Separate school systems. In some provinces, particularly Ontario, separate school systems for Catholic and Protestant students were established. This practice continues in some provinces to this day. Indigenous residential schools. Between the late 19th and mid-20th centuries, the Canadian government operated residential schools designed to assimilate Indigenous children into Euro-Canadian culture. These schools are now widely acknowledged as a dark chapter in Canadian history due to the mistreatment and cultural suppression experienced by Indigenous students. The 1960s and 1970s. The 1960s and 1970s saw significant reforms in Canadian education. These included the expansion of public education, the introduction of more inclusive and multicultural curricula, and the recognition of French as an official language alongside English. Bilingual education. Canada's bilingualism policy, enshrined in the Official Languages Act of 1969, aimed to promote both English and French as official languages. This led to the development of French immersion programs in many provinces. Inclusive education. Canada has made efforts to include students with disabilities in mainstream classrooms, with the passage of various laws and regulations promoting inclusive education. Higher education. Canada boasts a robust higher education system, with numerous universities, colleges, and technical institutes. It is known for its research excellence and attracts students from around the world. Recent developments. In recent years, there has been a focus on reconciliation efforts with Indigenous peoples, including reforms in Indigenous education to promote cultural preservation and mutual understanding. Canadian education continues to evolve, reflecting the country's diverse cultural landscape and its commitment to providing quality education to all its citizens. Educational policies and practices are continually adapting to meet the changing needs of Canadian society. Early Filipino-Canadian teacher in Canada. First wave of people from Philippines arrived in 1960s and 1970s to work as nurses, teachers and engineers. Calgarian Aurora Decani moved to Alberta in 1965 to work as a teacher in Tabor. As far as I know, I was one of the first Filipinos to come here, says Decani, who left Manila in the summer of 1965 to work in Alberta. She arrived in the province with two other Filipino teachers, one went to Lethbridge and the other to Fort Macleod. And while Decani was certainly part of a wave of Filipino professionals, teachers, nurses and engineers, to immigrate to Alberta in the 1960s, no one from the community can say for sure who was the first. But Decani remembers the early days of Alberta's Filipino community, and says whenever she and her friends heard of a new arrival, they set out to meet them. "We would go right away. Because you were so eager, right?" she says. "So we would drive to Edmonton. My landlady would say, 'Aurora, it's snowing. You know, there's a blizzard. And we didn't know what a blizzard was at the time. And we experienced the car spinning around Highway 2 going up north to Edmonton. Calgary was much smaller then, and Manila was already well on its way to becoming a megacity. There were only about 300,000 people at the time in Calgary. So you come from Manila, and it is a shocking experience. But it's so nice, too, because finally I got to Canada, and I couldn't believe it because I'm going to teach here, with all the tall people. So it was really an adventure.